for a while trying to figure out really how to articulate it. But I'm really excited to share this with you. Anything we do in life is going to come against opposition. Okay. That's just how it is. There's forces that are at work that are always against you. You want to lose weight. It's a lot easier to sit in a chair and to eat bad food. You want to build a business. It's a lot easier to procrastinate and put off the things that you know that'll build that business. Spiritually, you want to grow spiritually. There's obviously forces in play that are against you growing. Financially, I have spent a lot of time figuring out what are the opposing forces that keep us from being able to build wealth. So I want to go through those with you today and what tools we have to fight those enemies. Okay. And these may or may not surprise you, but these are the three biggest ones. I think there are a subcategory of smaller ones. There's all kinds of things. I was online just kind of covering my bases. Obviously, bad debt and things that come up, emergency expenses, those are all little things that can happen that can sidetrack our building wealth. But I want to talk about these major three. Number one, this time of the year, I really don't enjoy it because we're doing all these taxes and turning all this stuff into our CPAs. But number one, I think this is the biggest wealth eroding factor and enemy out there. Now, you may disagree with me, but the cool thing is there are ways to fight this. Taxes. I mean, let's just say you make if you're an accredited investor and you're one of our investors that goes into deals with us, you probably make at least $200,000 a year. You may be doing that as an employee, a W-2 employee, and we're going to talk about the cash flow quadrant as well. I hate to jump onto that, but you've got employed people, you've got self-employed people, you've got business owners, and you've got investors. And I'm trying to teach you guys, this is all Robert Kiyosaki stuff, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's a great book, but I think his second book was even better, which is the cash flow quadrant, which is what I just drew there. These are employees. These people derive their income from W-2, and they could be the guy at McDonald's flipping burgers, or this could be a top-notch executive bringing home a couple million a year. He's still a W-2 employee, bringing that money through a W-2. These people pay the absolute highest taxes. They're employed. Employees pay the highest taxes through W-2. Self-employed. A lot of people try to quit their jobs and get to this point where now they're flipping their own burgers. They own their own place, or they're working from home doing something, some skill, but they're still self-employed. It may even be a physician, a high-earning physician who has his own practice. He's self-employed. Guess what happens when that high-earning physician goes on vacation for 2 weeks? There's no income, more than likely. He may have some people working under him, but he is not making any money. And it's until the point where he actually owns a business and has a lot of physicians under him that are making money that he actually owns a business. And then the cream of the crop is the investor. And these people pay less and less taxes. Okay. So business owners pay less taxes than employees. Investors can actually get to zero taxes. And that's how we get there. With taxes, we've got to invest in tax advantaged opportunities. And there are some out there. I'm learning about a lot of them. Of course, you hear me talk about oil and gas. I'm real excited about that. Believe it or not, uh, motion pictures and film, some of that has some unbelievable tax advantages. I'm learning about that. I'll call it films. Not ready to take anybody into a deal like that, but taxes. Obviously, you've got real estate depreciation, and you'll hear a lot about this. You'll hear a lot of people that are trying to get you into their apartment building syndication talking about depreciation. The bad thing about depreciation, it has to be recaptured later. You don't get that. So depreciation will oftentimes wipe out your cash flow that's coming in yearly, but when the deal is sold, it has to be recaptured. Oil and gas does not. So there are reasons that you look at certain other investments. But taxes being number one biggest enemy, this is how we mitigate that. Number two, interest. All right. And this is where we get off on the infinite banking. Okay. The thing about interest is Nelson Nash, who wrote Becoming Your Own Banker, which is this book that I tell people that they need to read. And honestly, you got to read it multiple times. I was talking about that this morning on a message board. You can't read this book once. It's dangerous if you read it once. You need to read it 2, 3 times. You probably need to read it yearly for the next 10 years, because you will mature and learn more out of this book each time you read it. What Nelson Nash noted is that the average American is spending something around $32,000 a year, 32% of their income on interest. So this is mortgage interest, which you can see that, but it's also car interest, it's credit card interest, it's kind of unseen financing that you do. That 0% car that you thought you bought for that didn't have, it's still interest built in those payments. It's invisible interest. It's in there, folks. And think about 30% or 32% a year. If you're bringing home $100,000, it sounds like a lot, but a lot of it's hidden. And taxes up here are hidden too. Where I live, they're getting ready to raise the sales tax another half a point, I think. So it's hidden. A lot of this is hidden, and that's what goes on behind the scenes to kind of keep us in the dark. So if we can figure out a way to recapture the interest we're paying, how crazy good would that be? And the way we do that and combat this enemy is with infinite banking. Okay? And that's just what I said with Nelson Nash. This is a long process. It doesn't fix the problem right away. You have to start diverting some income into an infinite banking system, which happens to be built on whole life insurance policies. We can argue all day long. I don't really argue with people about this. If you don't see it, it's because you don't see it and you haven't learned how to see it yet. But infinite banking provides so many benefits, but one of them is, and Nelson Nash said this, your need for finance far outweighs your need for a death benefit. But someday that death benefit death will happen, and it sure is nice to have that death benefit. Infinite banking is about one of the few ways that we can combat this. Interest is perpetuated on us by banks. Banks inflate money. They contribute to the problem. Uh, they create money out of thin air, and then they rent it to you, and that's what's interest. Becoming your own banker, which is another term you'll hear a lot, is the only way to mitigate this. You have to put yourself in place of the banks and quit using them for financing and start self-financing and start a family finance bank where you stop that 32% leak that's happening in your life, and it's eroding your wealth. It's eroding your ability to grow your wealth and become financially free. Number 3 is a big one. We don't always get to see this, but we did get to see it in the last 2 years, and it's inflation. Inflation. And the cool thing is inflation, it's going to happen because of banks creating and printing more money. And people think that Washington, D.C. is up there printing money. They're really not. And actually, right now, they're not printing much money. They don't print it. What they do is give banks permission to lend it. And when they lend it, they create it out of thin air. A lot of people don't understand how banks work. If you need to borrow $10 million, that money is not in the safe. The bank goes to the Federal Reserve and gets that money. They get the permission to invest the money supply. They probably have to have $1 million in the safe. They go get the rest and they borrow it. The Fed lending rate, that's what we're talking about. And that used to be 0% for a long time. So banks were borrowing money from the Fed at 0 and loaning it to you at 3. And we were happy as larks because interest rates at 3, the lowest we've ever seen. How much stuff can we buy? But you don't realize the bank was making an infinite return because they had no cost on the money and they were loaning it to you at 3. Now it's costing them 4 or 5, and they're loaning it to you at 7 or 8. They're not making as much money as they were when interest rates were lower, but they're still making a lot of money. Okay, banks are inflating that. That's where inflation is coming from. And the way you combat that, you've got to be in investments. You've got to be in cash flowing investments that are substantive, that are they're real assets. You've got to be in those kinds of things. So when we invest in the marina here in East Tennessee, we've put some money into a cash flowing asset. And when inflation goes up, rents typically go up with it. When you have the cost of a gallon of fuel goes up, it goes up on the boat dock. They've got to pay more for it. So when your money is in assets, it can ride this inflation wave. And another thing is infinite banking helps defeat inflation. If you're an infinite banker, you're not contributing to the problem. Insurance companies can't inflate the money supply. So if you get a $10 million loan from a bank, from an insurance company, and they do make those loans, quite often some of the biggest projects you see in a city or town, the loan came from an insurance company. And if they made $100 million loan, every bit of that cash was in their vault. They're not allowed to inflate money. So if you can get off this drug of interest and quit using banks and start infinite banking and keeping that money in your own system, you're actually helping to pull down inflation on a small level. And that's one of the things Nelson Nash wanted to see 10% of America start using this. And it would actually have an effect. If enough people started infinite banking, they would see a change in inflation. But the cool thing is inflation is fought with assets, and it's fought with being your own banker. That's how we fight inflation. Now, here's the cool thing. Let's look at this and say you make, like we said before, let's say you're a high income earner, you make $200,000 a year. It's not uncommon for somebody making $200,000 a year to pay 25% in taxes. Okay? And it's not uncommon for somebody making $200,000 a year. Let's just say you're paying 15% in interest, 15%. So that's so you've got 50 going out the door in taxes. You've got another 30 going out the door in maybe mortgage interest, automobile interest, loans, credit cards. You're losing $80,000 a year because of these enemies. These enemies of wealth are eroding your income down to where they let you have a piddly 120. And let me tell you, then you get to go pay your property taxes. Then you get to go buy your groceries and get to go do things that are over. And inflation is going to eat the rest of the 120. The inflation is going to make that 120 feel like 80. So that's why this is so vitally important to understand who your financial enemies are and start developing a plan to defeat these things, because they will take you down. You can't outsave, you can't out 401k these forces. These things have gotten huge. Taxes are monstrous. Interest, inflation, these things all together, you can't win. You can't outsave them. You can't win. You'd have to, it's impossible for the average median income to win in this environment. So you've got to figure out how to battle them. Nobody's teaching this in school. I hope you're learning. I hope this isn't the first time you've seen this. If it is, I'd love to hear what you think about this. And this is what I teach with Smart A Investors. I'd love it if you check us out, smartainvestors.com. We're always talking about this. I'm helping you find assets that are going to go after each of these. I love talking about infinite banking. All these things help us battle these forces. And the worst thing you could do is sit on your hands and do nothing. The second worst thing you can do is just play along and keep socking money into a 401k. We'll talk more about this. We'll talk more about the cash flow quadrant, because you've got to learn this and you got to get to the other side of the quadrant. Because if you keep playing the 401k game and giving your money to I was going to say Washington, but if you keep giving your money to New York, to Wall Street, and in essence you're giving it to Washington, you're going to lose. You can't win. You can't win this game. So hope this video taught you something. I hope you liked it and enjoyed it. Hope this is something you can share with other people. And please do, if you know somebody that needs to hear or see this, share it with them. I love teaching this stuff, and I love helping people learn and get their assets, at least some of their assets, off Wall Street into these type of assets, so they can start changing this outlook. Imagine if you took this 80K and you put it in an oil and gas deal, and that deal gave you a huge $70,000 write off. And not only that, the 80K come back to you in 2 years. That's what's happening with some of these oil and gas deals right now. Oil is right around $75 a barrel. There's a lot of things going on there. It's a commodity. There are risks that you need to understand. But if you can turn that 80, if you can save it and put it to work, in essence, you are a 280K earner. We just flipped that. $160,000 if you know how to play this game. And if you don't, you're going to get beat. You're going to get defeated. And you're going to wonder, why am I never getting ahead? I got a raise and it's just gone. Where's it going? You're never going to win if you keep playing the same old game. And you can win from the employee. I don't want anybody to be discouraged. If you're an employee that's still earning a W-2, you can still put these things into effect. Don't have to always, but employees also can invest, right? It's just these primary investors like Donald Trump that don't pay any taxes, and then they get people ask them questions and say, well, you didn't pay any taxes. They don't understand what an investor's doing to get out of the taxes. And there's a huge advantage to be an investor in this economy. So again, hope you guys like this. Have a great day.